Those Weekend Golf Guys is the golf podcast for people who think.
Are you tired of endless arguments over what to stream next? It's time to have a real night out again. You've earned it. And if you want to, make it a night out in the city. Indiana residents can save up to 50% off hotel stays. The city of Indianapolis is excited to welcome you back safely. Check out visitindy.com for more details on your favorite museum and attraction reopening plans.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. With a lot of hockey and baseball to a little BS. It's the BS Sports Show with Brendan Azoff and Stefan Rosner on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the BS Sports Show live on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. My name is Brendan Azoff, and joining me momentarily is the one and only Stefan Rosner. We have a lot of hockey and baseball news to dive into today as the NHL's first round is winding down and the MLB continues to create unwanted headlines in the news. At the 9:40 hour, we will have Christian Arnold of NYI Hockey Now to come on and discuss the Islanders and their current series with the Capitals. And Stefan, are you ready to have some fun tonight?
Am I ready to have some fun tonight? Every night. Speaking of having fun, if you could see this, Tito Anthony Bavillier, always telling us to have fun. Get this shirt at yesmanoutfitters.com. Great shirt, Long Island company. Definitely support them. It's an awesome shirt, very comfortable as well.
Yeah, that's great. And, the shirt is, depictive of what Tito Bavillier has been doing for the Islanders in this first round and the qualifying round as well. But let's get into some of the NHL headlines, starting with last night's action. Obviously, there's games going on today, but let's go previously first. Vegas, they breezed past Chicago in the first round. They win the series 4-1. And really, despite a lackadaisical performance in Game 5 from Robin Leonard, it was still Vegas just all the way.
Completely. Like you said, Leonard didn't have the best game, the last game, but 5-1 in the playoffs, 2.44 goals against average, 904 save percentage. And, since coming to Vegas, he's been an absolute brick wall. Fleury doesn't get the start, so clearly they have faith in what he brings. And it was the coolest thing to see, too, after they eliminated Chicago. Again, Leonard was traded from Chicago at the deadline. He shook hands with every one of the Blackhawks, hugged all of them, and you could just know that he was giving inspiring messages to all of them. On Twitter, he reached out saying, "Great series, bright future ahead, class act guy, really hard to root against him."
I completely agree. You could tell that it meant a lot to him to play in that series, and it's not the type of guy that nobody wanted. Like, they were happy for Robin Leonard to advance on to the next round. Vegas was outscored Chicago 15-11. The game was in the series, not in that game, obviously, but the Game 5 was played continuously in Chicago's end, as were most of the games in that series. Leonard is 5-1 in the postseason now with a 2.44 goals against average. Pretty solid numbers, and Vegas looks like a wagon just moving on to the next round. Carter Hart had back-to-back shutouts for the Flyers. They're playing right now as well, but Philadelphia's up 3-1 in the series. Very low scoring, which is a surprise considering how good Philadelphia's offense looked. The goals are 6-5. Montreal, they're in favor of Montreal, but Philly leads the series 3-1.
That's so interesting because we talk about Montreal, and it was either Carey Price going to have to steal games because Montreal can't score. We talked about it in the qualifying rounds where you're getting secondary scoring from the defense. Jeff Peachy with 2 goals. Weber a goal. You're getting secondary scoring for a team that really didn't show any offense throughout the whole year, is finding it now, and they're finding it at the best time.
They really are, and it's been a pretty interesting series to watch. A lot of goaltending, which might not be the most appealing to the average fan, but to somebody who watches the game as closely as we do, it's really fun to watch 2 great goalies battle it out. And you also have the Flames and the Stars, who might actually be one of the more intriguing series of the first round. It's 3-2 Dallas. It's gone back and forth the whole time, and the Calgary Flames are missing Matthew Tkachuk, which has been a huge loss so far.
You look at Matthew Tkachuk, and he's one of those guys. You could look at other teams, a Ryan Reeves, a Tom Wilson. Out of all of them, Tkachuk's obviously the most talented offensive player. We've seen what he could do. One of the greatest goals I've ever seen was his between the legs and right before overtime, I think, or with seconds left in overtime against Nashville, against an Aliko and Pecorine. Brilliant. But he's a pest. He's got Marchand skills, but a lot more size to him. His brother, Brady Tkachuk, he was at the top 5 in hits in the entire NHL. So not having a guy like this, especially in a series where Dallas is a physical team, they got big bodies. Not having him is a big loss, and it could be a reason why they lose this series.
Yeah, Kachuk took a groin shot and a head shot in game 2. So despite how tough he is and how physically gifted he is, that's enough to get any man out of a game in a series, let alone. So we'll see if he can come back for what could be a decisive game 6 and help Calgary stave off elimination. So now it's time to move on to the Zello NHL scoreboard update brought to you by Zello Clothing. See their latest styles on Instagram at Zello Clothing, that's Zello Clothing, or on their website, zelloclothing.com. Obviously, the Flyers and Canadiens are the lone game that's on TV right now. The Flyers have just tied it up. It is now 1-1 in the second period, early in the second. The Lightning defeated the Blue Jackets 5-4 in OT. Braden Point with another OT winner. They win the series 4-1. Boston defeated Carolina 2-1. Patrice Bergeron with his second game-winning goal of the series. Boston advances to the next round. And the Colorado Avalanche win 7-1 for the second game in a row. Absolutely rolling over the Arizona Coyotes. They too advance to the next round.
Going back to the Montreal Flyers game, the Flyers are on a 5-minute power play as Kotkaniemi was ejected for boarding against Travis Sanheim. So that is being served by Charles Hudon. But again, hockey fans know a game misconduct, 5-minute major. It does not go away once a goal is scored. So I'm pretty sure the Flyers are still on the power play in this one. It looks like they have 4:10 left on their power play. That's a big loss for Canadians because Kotkaniemi has been absolutely great for them.
Yeah, I saw a glimpse of the hit. It didn't look good. Sanheim got up bloody all over his visor. I think it was a boarding hit. So obviously not a hit you want to see. Kotkaniemi is a very good player for Montreal. He's come alive in this postseason as a youngster. So that's a big loss, especially since this is a must-win game for them in order to stave off elimination. So, Stefan, we're going to go over our standouts now in these playoffs so far, at least in the first round, and we're going to kick things off to you. You got a good one up top.
Yeah, so I picked Nazem Kadri before today. And before today, he was killing it. Big guy on the power play. Great guy. You look back at that trade, right? Tyson Barrie for Kadri. You would think that Toronto won that deal because they needed defense. Barrie was coming off an unreal season. Kadri was, a depth center. This is what Kadri's doing right now. 11 points in 8 games. Got 6 goals, 5 assists. 5 power play goals.
Unreal.
Had 2 goals and assists in Game 4 Onslaught, a 7-1 game. And obviously, the next game, Game 5, was also a 7-1 win. He had 2 goals as well. His second line with Jonas Donskoy and Valeri Nichushkin has been brilliant. Donskoy is not a guy that gets a lot of credit, but he's playing second line minutes, and that line is clicking. Again, the power play has been clicking as well. Again, that trade, man, you look back at that. We talked earlier that Toronto could not afford to keep Kadri. They had to move him. They really thought they were getting a great defenseman in return. Seems like when defensemen go to Toronto, they just die. Seems like be the case, but Kadri's paid off, and the Avalanche are just rolling.
They really are, and that's a great pick because Nazem Kadri has just looked unreal, especially in that bumper spot in the middle on the power play. And that's a team you give any type of power play chance to, they're going to convert. And Arizona learned that the really, really hard way.
Fun fact, Avalanche scored 2 power play goals in the first period, or 2 power play goals before 10 minutes. I think they scored 3. So in the first 10 minutes, they scored more power play goals than the New York Islanders have in the series against the Washington Capitals.
Yep.
All right, moving on. My other player is Pierre-Luc Dubois. He has, despite Columbus being eliminated, he has been the player they expected. You could think about Anthony Beauvillier and the Islanders. These are talented players, but never really showed that superstar offensive ability, but we're seeing it now. 10 games, he's got 4 goals, 5 assists. He only scored 18 goals in the year, but it doesn't matter. It's what you do in the playoffs. And this is what people have been waiting for. He's playing top center minutes, and he's definitely played a lot better in these playoffs. Definitely something to build off of for next season.
Yeah, he looks like a player that he's coming into his own. And obviously under a Tortorella system, you're not going to be able to shine offensively. We see in every team he plays for, they don't really have those elite goal scorers, and that's because he makes you pack it into your own end, and that's why they're successful. But Pierre-Luc Dubois in this postseason showed glimpses of star offensive potential. And like you said, his size makes him very difficult to bump off a puck. And I think he's going to be able to use that in the future when Columbus is in the postseason again to his advantage.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
He really is.
My last pick, my only goaltender. I know, Brendan, when we get to you have a few goaltenders on there. Mine's Jake Allen. And the biggest thing for me is the guy lost his starting job last year to Binnington. Fair enough. Binnington killed it. And then, we know how that ended with the Stanley Cup. And then this year, Jake Allen only plays 24 games this year. Career low. But he puts up 2.15 goals against average, .927 save percentage. And when Binnington struggled in the playoffs, Jake Allen comes in. 2-0-1 record, 1.20 goals against average, .961 save percentage. He played the last 2 games against Vancouver. 2-0, .954 save percentage, 1.5 goals against average. they're going to ride him. Why not? He's been the better goaltender. And I think, look at a goal like this, a veteran. I think the break of only playing 24 games in the season, not that it was good that he didn't play a lot. I think it let him get back to the basics. You're playing a lot of games. It's really hard to take a breath, sit down and go, okay, I got to fix this. I got to fix that. He's playing limited games. He's watching what Binnington's doing. He has more time to look at video. He's seeing obviously watching from the bench. You're seeing what's happening on the ice a lot more. You're learning tendencies. I think the break really helped him. Not saying next year he should start, but it's clearly worked, and he's going to take this and run with it as long as he can go.
We talked about this in an earlier episode of this podcast, how Jake Allen looked very impressive this season despite the limited games. And you got to remember, this is a guy that's been in this role before. When he first came up with Brian Elliott, he split time. So he's not a foreign person to the backup role and having to come into games. And he's done his job. He's rested. He's in great shape. Obviously, he's watched these guys play. Even though he's on the bench, he's picking up tendencies. And he's just run away with this series. He's been the turning point for St. Louis, and now it's even. And we'll see how they do tonight. But going to my breakouts in these playoffs, or standouts, I should say, I have 3 goalies because to me, the playoffs have just been determined by goaltenders so far. We talked about the Philly-Montreal series, which is legitimately 6-5 in goals before this game. It's now 7-6. So there's 13 goals scored in 5 games, which is just extremely low scoring. My first is Jonas Korpisalo, who put up a .941 save percentage this postseason and is now eliminated from the playoffs. He had a 3-5 record, a losing record, with a .941 save percentage and a 1.90 goals against average with 2 shutouts. Just it stinks to see for him because he played his heart out, and Columbus they were a tired team come the end of that series, and Tampa Bay just beat them.
Look, this matchup with Columbus and Tampa is not what we saw last year. Last year, we saw a not ready Tampa Bay Lightning team and a completely over ready Columbus Blue Jackets team that just, created opportunities, scored all the time, came through when they needed to, and they just dominated a top team. But this year, it was a battle. It was a battle for Columbus to win a game. They stayed at it, though, and you have to give them a lot of credit because Korpisalo is a special talent. Now, this year, Bobrovsky leaves. Goaltending was a really big question mark, and not only do they have 1 answering goal with Korpisalo, they have 2 with Merzlikins. Merzlikins was hurt, but you weren't starting Merzlikins anyway with the way Korpisalo played in the qualifiers, and now in this series, you do feel bad. You look at the game today, and it wasn't his best. He let in a couple of soft ones, but when a goalie plays like that for the whole entire playoffs, his team's got to be there to back him up. And Tampa, it went to overtime, and Tampa got the last laugh, and they move on. But definitely, John Tortorella walked out of his post-game interview like he usually does. He's not happy. I don't blame him. I'm assuming everyone's upset. I would like them to be. They just lost in the playoffs. But you look back, and what an unreal season given what they lost and how they battled back to make the playoffs and they made a statement.
They did. And now we're going to move on to my second standout, who's Darcy Kemper. And I'm not even going to read off his stats because he wound up 4-5 in the playoffs. His goals against is going to be well over 3. To me, he does not, his numbers do not dictate how well he played this postseason. I think that he proved to everybody he is a legitimate number 1 goalie in this league, and he got completely left out to dry by the Arizona Coyotes in the last 2 games of this series. He gave up 4 in game 4, and he gave up 6 today in game 5. And, I mean, the goals that he allowed today, yes, he allowed 6 goals. I don't think he had a chance on any of them. Maybe he wants 1 back. But it was just McKinnon wiring from the slot. You got Rantanen wiring 1 from the slot. It's just Kadri 2 from the slot and 1 on a breakaway. It's just absurd what this guy was put in the line of fire with. And, he played extremely well. And to me, he stood out for the Arizona Coyotes during the postseason. This
is not a guy that's going to win a Vezina this year, but his stats he played 29 games this year. Put the record aside of 16-11-2. He had a 2.22 goals against average and a .928 save percentage. I mean, he was phenomenal. He was phenomenal in the playoffs. Again, another goalie like a Korpisalo who has to make a statement that you're a true number 1 in the league, and you hit it right on the head. He is, and he's going to be next year. And I think that he played well. His team did not play well in front of him today. Ronta did come in for the 3rd. I thought that Kemper might get pulled sooner, just given the fact that Rick Teixeira, he had to wake his team up. But the team looked lifeless right from the start, and you knew it was going to be one of those runaway games yet again when they scored, I think, 3 goals in the first period. Arizona looked defeated. Taylor Hall, I think he has 1 goal this year's, and it was an empty netter. I mean, it could be his last game in an Arizona Coyotes uniform, but you have to give credit to Kemper when it's due, and he definitely deserved it. And obviously he's going to be pissed off the way it ended, but he did all he could in the series and in the regular season to get them to this point.
Yeah, he did. And Colorado was just a phenomenal team, as we'll talk about in a little bit, but they just proved that Arizona was not ready for this stage. My final one is Carey Price. Obviously, we don't need to say much about him. 4-4 this postseason, 1.48 goals against average, 949 save percentage with 2 shutouts. He's just doing Carey Price things. We talked about how he's going to steal one game in Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh qualifying round series, and we thought that Pittsburgh would win 3-1, but didn't turn out to be the case. In fact, it was Montreal winning 3-1, basically because of Carey Price, and now they don't look like they're in good shape in this series, but the only reason it's close is because of Carey Price. He's allowed, Philadelphia's up 2-1, so now he's allowed 7 goals in 5 games. But that still is just unreal. And, people talked about his injuries, him aging. Doesn't matter. He is still a top-tier goalie and probably the best goalie in the NHL.
Wow. Coming from you, really? You really
I have to say, the way he's played this postseason. I mean, he's shown glimpses of being overrated. He also reminds me a lot of Henrik Lundqvist just because he's so good and the team in front of him isn't. And it feels like he's going to have that same career trajectory as Lundqvist. So I feel for him. But yes, what he's doing right now is just, you can't beat him.
I mean, he played a ton of games this year, which could be a reason for the stats not being as good as he wants them to be. 58 games played, 27, 25, and 6 record, 2.79 goals against average, and a 909 save. But like we said, Carey Price was going to have to steal at least one game in a series, and he did more than that. And, if they get eliminated tonight, they get eliminated. But this wasn't a team that was really expected to do much. Actually, Pittsburgh was really expected to just roll over them because Pittsburgh scores goals, Montreal does not. However, Montreal took Pittsburgh down. Carey Price played phenomenal. And the Flyers are just a team that no one really thought was going to do much. I was only one apparently, but they would somehow win, but that was just a gut feeling because I hate them so much. So I knew that they would ruin my day by doing that. But you look at Montreal Canadiens and he's the face of the franchise. He's like a Lundqvist. You think of Canadiens, you think of Carey Price, now maybe Shea Weber for the younger fans, but he doesn't count. So you look at it and it's just, how much longer does Carey Price have to win with Montreal? And is Montreal set to do that? I think seeing what Kotkaniemi did, besides the hit, obviously, no bueno. This team has a young team that could do damage next year. But again, time's running out. But Carey Price, no one expected him to do what he did in the playoffs, and he did just that, which is why he made your list.
Yep, and listen, Montreal kind of hurt themselves by going this far in the playoffs because I'm sure Mark Bergevin would have wanted a higher draft pick because you're going to lose in the first round anyway. But moving on quickly, we're going to touch about the Rangers and their free agency dilemma a little bit. I wrote an article for the Hockey Writers discussing a couple of free agents that they could pick up. Obviously, they have Ryan Strome, who's an RFA, Jesper Foss is a UFA, and Tony DeAngelo, who apparently asked a fan to fight in front of Madison Square Garden today, got into a little bit of a Twitter beef. So that's a fun fact if you didn't know that. But they're all free agents, and obviously Ryan Strome and Tony DeAngelo are priorities. It's going to be tough to bring them back in a flat cap. They're going to have to do some maneuvering, but there's a couple of cheap pieces, such as Brad Richardson of the Coyotes, career 51.4% on the faceoffs. Derek Brassard, a former Ranger. Joel Edmondson, who's a very good defenseman from Carolina. Nate Thompson, who's, I think, leading the NHL playoffs with a 66% faceoff percentage this postseason. And Zach Bogosian, who could be a serviceable defenseman, very cheap, which I don't want them to go to, but he is affordable. But those 5 names you could be on the lookout for. Jeff Gordon's going to do his due diligence, and I expect a couple of those players to get some calls because they have a gaping hole in the third and fourth line center.
You have to think Fast is gone. You just have to think he's gone. Strome's iffy, just the fact that, like you said, the top priority is probably Tony DeAngelo, given the fact that the Rangers have offense. They need defense, and obviously if you had to choose, you need the defenseman. Mm-hmm. But, Ryan Strome had a great season. He seems to have found a home. He doesn't want to move. I know that for a fact because he said it. He's been around the block with Islanders, Oilers, comes to the Rangers, and now, he has success, and you don't want to leave that, obviously. So we'll see what happens with that. But you look at the top free agents around the league that are available. Alex Pietrangelo, captain of the St. Louis Blues. Braden Holtby, who is probably not coming back for the Capitals. They won't be able to afford him, let alone his terrible play. Taylor Hall and the Coyotes, who did nothing in the playoffs, really, and, we know about him. Torrey Krug, great defenseman for the Bruins. Smaller in size, but again, a very good puck-moving defenseman. Robin Lehner, who, if Vegas was smart, they would find a way to re-sign him because you didn't start Fleury for a reason in the playoffs. You had more faith in Lehner. That means something. And then you look at it, you also have Tyson Barrie, defenseman, Mike Hoffman on Florida, who I hope the Islanders go after. If the Rangers and Islanders go between that, which it shouldn't, again, because the Rangers need defense.
The Rangers will not be going after Mike
thank
Hoffman.
God. All right, I could breathe a sigh of relief. You look at the top RFAs, Matt Murray. Good luck whoever takes him. Nikita Zadorov, Ryan Strome, like we just talked about, Tony DeAngelo, Andre Burakovsky, Connor Brown, Max Domi, and Andreas Athanasiou. So there's options out of it. This is not a weak free agency class by any means. There's going to be a lot of money handed out. It'll be really interesting to see with the flat cap how I don't want to use the word selfish, but you look at hockey's they're very good in their community. They know what's going around the world. They're not really selfish with money because they don't make as much as many other sports. I talked about this with Matt Barzal. I really do have a strong feeling that he's going to take a lower contract because, these teams are going to sign these guys. They want to be able to build around them. If they sign Matt Barzal to as cheap as possible, then they can go after a guy like Hoffman. But if Barzal asks for the most possible for his RFA deal, then it really limits what they could sign. So a lot of these teams that go after players like this, they're going to try to get them on the cheap end because that's how business works. But I'm curious to see how much players do ask for in this unprecedented times.
Yeah, I think in regards to the RFAs, because obviously UFAs, they're free to do whatever they want. Those contracts are definitely going to be interesting. But for the RFAs, I think we're going to see a lot of arbitration hearings this offseason because they're going to ask for what they're worth, and rightfully so. But teams are now stuck with a cap that's not going to be moving, so they're going to lowball them. And I want to see how the arbitrator rules. I think that you're going to see a couple of very team-friendly deals, which stinks for these free agents who paid their dues and are looking for bigger contracts. But the COVID-19 and pandemic, it's ruined so many jobs, it's hurt so many careers, and it's going to affect the professional athletes as well. Moving on to Jordan Binnington, obviously we talked about Jake Allen's performance. Binnington struggled 0-4 with a 4.27 goals against average this postseason and an .862 save percentage. So obviously a complete 360 from where he was last season come playoff time.
Completely different. And like I said, Jake Allen's run with it. Binnington has not been good. He did not have a great regular season either. I mean, look, those stats are they're abysmal. And for a St. Louis Blues team that's trying to show last year wasn't a fluke, or last half a season and playoffs wasn't a fluke because they were bad for the first half. They were in last place. It's very interesting to see. Is he a one and done? Look back at like a guy like Andrew Hammond, who gets called up by Ottawa, goes on an absolute tear, and then is not even talked about, and he's in the minor leagues now. Do we have a case with this with Binnington? I don't think so. I think Binnington's a lot better. I just think everything that happened to him last year, the adrenaline, everything like that played a huge part. And this year is a little bit different given the fact that your team did win. Now you have a lot of pressure to do exactly what you did last year, and he hasn't done that. I think it's a good learning curve for him, like quote-unquote sophomore slump. I think that's what we're seeing right now. I think he's going to be fine next year, but right now it hasn't been good. He's going to support Jake Allen in there, and hopefully he rebounds.
Yeah, let's not forget he also had 4.5 months off between playing in the regular season and playoffs, so that definitely hurts him as well. Tuukka Rask opted out because of his daughter's medical emergency. Obviously, you can't criticize somebody for opting out during COVID. The Bruins are 3-0 since his departure and did win the series. They are playing and rallying around Yaroslav Halak. The Philadelphia Flyers just gave up a power play goal to Montreal, so it's now 3-2 Montreal in the second period. And when we come back, we have Christian Arnold of NYI Hockey Now. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned for that interview.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You're listening to the BS Sports Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the BS Sports Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. We're going to dive into the Isles and Cap series. Obviously, being a New York-based podcast, Stefan has had a heart attack the last couple of games, especially after blowing a 2-goal lead in Game 4, looking for the sweep. But the Islanders have looked good. They're up 3-1. They just have to find a way to shut down Ovechkin in these elimination games, and I think they'll be all right.
Brendan, I was so excited to come on this show, this radio show, wearing my Islander jersey, Islander hat. Green screen was not going to have our logo. It would definitely have I think it was going to have the Barzal celebration. I was so pumped. I had it all planned out, and the Islanders had to play 3 years ago Islander hockey, where it was just get a lead, blow it. The hardest thing was they came out so strong, and you expected the Capitals to push back. Obviously, the Capitals are a veteran team. We saw it in the game in January. The Islanders had a 4-1 lead going into the third period. Case closed, usually for Islander games, especially under Trotz. That's a win. Lockdown defense we saw in the first couple of games in the series. That's how the Islanders win games. Well, Devon Taves decided to mimic Evgeny Kuznetsov, and that was a mistake because Caps came back. Ovechkin finished off a hat trick. They lose that game 6-4. They play the Capitals again later in the year, and they have a lead going to the third. They don't blow it. So yesterday was a kind of a shock given the fact that they played so strong, and then they started taking penalties. They took penalties, and Capitals power play, is not anywhere close to the Islanders when you have a guy like Ovechkin on that unit. And then you saw the pace of play change. You saw the Capitals play extremely aggressive, finishing every hit. They got out hit in the game. I think it was 40-35, something around there. They got out hit, but their hits a lot harder, not vicious. I mean, they have Tom Wilson on the ice. It could get vicious, but they were just finishing their checks. I know Cal Clutterbuck, which we'll ask Christian Arnold about later, was dumping the puck into the zone after the fourth line was pinned in their own end for, I think, like 2 minutes and 30-something seconds. Yep. And Racco Gudas levels him with a hip check. We haven't seen hip checks in a very long time, but gets him. He does not return for the rest of the game. And pretty much from that point on, you knew the Caps were going to win the game. And then we talked about it, how when Ovechkin got on that 2-on-1, Devon Taves is playing the pass, as every defenseman is taught to do, except the only guy you should never play the pass against is Ovechkin, because he's not gonna pass that. Yes, like we talked about earlier, he would toe drag probably around the defenseman, score a beautiful goal anyway, and embarrass the Islanders organization as a whole. But a perfectly placed shot, and it was detrimental, and they lose this game. Christian Arnold is here. Let's get him on the show.
Perfect.
What is up, Christian? How are you doing?
Hey guys, how's it going?
I hear in your voice too. He's a little upset too about the game last night. It makes sense. All right.
It was a rough one to sit through.
It was a rough one to sit through, and as both of us being writers, obviously you're more high up than me. Having to write a post-game article, anything about the game, I went to sleep. I didn't even write it last night. I woke up early. I said, I can't do this. I can't do it. But all right, let's dive into what you have a new thing going on here. We'll get into it. Tell us a little bit about NYI Hockey Now.
Oh, I appreciate you guys allowing me to plug my nonsense. It's a new Islanders website. We're covering the Islanders extensively, similar to kind of what you're seeing with The Athletic. There's some free stuff. There's some premium stuff when you sign up for a membership. I know you have already signed up, so I do appreciate that. A good friend right there. So that's how you know, I think, right? Yeah. But we're doing a lot of good stuff. I think the whole idea is to give Islander fans a lot of really good content, because there's obviously a lot of content out there when it comes to sports and stuff, but I think the Islanders are a bit of an underserved market, and you know, our task at hand is just to kind of provide Islander fans with more coverage and good professional coverage. The idea is once things get back to normal, whatever that looks like down the road, we'll be on the road a little bit, and more as things kind of get off the ground. We're going to have someone up in Bridgeport covering the Sound Tigers on a pretty regular basis as well. So we're really going to try and encompass the entire idea of the New York Islanders franchise from the top down.
Love it. I mean, you don't get sick of Islanders content unless it's about them blowing leads. But luckily for us, we haven't seen that really often over the last 2 years.
I can tell you I get sick of Islanders content. That's because I'm a Rangers fan, though.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I get that. I totally do. As long as you're still clicking on it, though, I don't have a problem with you being sick of it.
Of course I'm going to click on it. I love reading what you write. But obviously, you've been covering the Islanders all season, watching them very closely. And have they surprised you at all of how strong they've played this postseason? Obviously, they had a little hiccup in Game 4, but have they surprised you with their play?
Yeah, the postseason I think has been really interesting because I think it's kind of a return to form for the Islanders and really where we saw them at the earlier part of the year. I'm sure you guys both remember the way the Islanders are playing in October and November and a little bit of December. And that was really the Islanders at their best. They were fully healthy. They had bought into the Trotz system. They really were playing the kind of hockey that we're seeing right now. So it's not surprising considering the amount of injuries that they've had, especially the second half of the season. They lose Adam Pelech, which was huge, and no one really contemplated that being such a huge loss until it happened. You're without Casey Zizekas and Cal Clutterbuck at certain points. You're dealing with other injuries that you just really didn't foresee. And so that really hurt the Islanders. And I think now you see them at full strength. You see them with depth in a lot of positions that they didn't have depth earlier in the year, and that's certainly helped. So I think it's surprising to see how handily they had handled the Capitals up until this point, because I think even Barry Trotz wouldn't have really seen the 3-0 series lead going to Game 4, but obviously the Caps kind of turned it on a bit. But yeah, no, I think it's surprising in that sense. We all knew that the Islanders are good when they're playing their game. I don't think people really anticipated or maybe respected them enough to give them the credit that this was going to be a team that really could compete the way they have been in the postseason.
So was it a surprise, though, the way Semyon Varlamov has played this postseason, given the fact that he was consistent during the regular season, nothing too impressive. He made big saves at times, but he has come to life in these playoffs.
Yeah, no, I think you look at the way he's played, right? I think it's helped that the healthy defenseman in front of him, you have a healthy defensive core. You have a veteran like Andy Green who stepped in and filled in for Johnny Boychuk, who is healthy, by the way. So you really have this depth and these options for the team that you didn't have before. So that certainly helps, and it makes the Islanders' goaltender's job a little easier. Thomas Greiss, too, would probably have the same benefit if he was in net. So I think on one hand, I think the consistency helps Varlamov. I think we've talked about this before away from, microphones and Twitter. And, he plays better when he's in there consistently, and he's basically been their starter for a while now, so it shouldn't have been too much of a surprise that he's been in there. Like I said, the help comes from the guys in front of him, and there's certainly a comfort level for them knowing that Varlamov he's made the big saves when he's had to. He hasn't faced a ton. The 29 shots that the Islanders gave up in Game 4 was the most they've given up in the entire postseason, which is incredible. And it really goes to talk about how the Islanders system works, especially in the playoffs. So that's only benefited Semyon Varlamov. And so that's great for the Islanders. He hasn't had to have a ton of work, but when he's had to face some tough shots, he's made the big saves. For the most part, I should say. The other night, maybe a little bit withstanding.
The other night, everyone was a little off, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. So the Achilles heel for the Islanders in the playoffs has been their power play. In this, they're 1 for 19 in this series. What changes can they make personnel-wise on their power play to get this thing going? Because we saw in Florida, they had the Beauvillier line up for the quick one-timer, top of the circle, and it worked. Capitals know that's coming, and they're taking that away. What can they do?
Yeah, they've watched the game tape. I think a lot of the guys have said it over the last couple games. The Capitals have watched the game tape, and they've certainly adjusted, and they've made the necessary moves to counter that. That being said, I don't know. It's a good question because there's really not a lot of moves that they could do with the roster that they have, because as great as the Islanders are, they are a great, team first built roster. But when you look at what the Islanders need, and that's a score. Someone said that today earlier on Twitter to me, and they were spot on. The Islanders don't have a finisher on the roster really. Matt Barzal maybe, because he's their best player and he's essentially their star, but he's not the finisher that the Islanders need at the moment anyway. I don't want to take anything away from Barzal, but that's the big thing. The Islanders just don't have a finisher. They have a lot of great playmakers, especially when it comes to their special teams guys. They just don't have that finisher, and I think that's what's kind of lacking, because you look at the Capitals, right? Everyone knows the puck's going Alexander Ovechkin. It's not a secret. Even if someone who has watched hockey for 2 days and they've just seen 2 Capitals games, everyone knows that Alexander Ovechkin's getting the puck on the power play. The problem with that, though, too, is that the Capitals also have a couple other weapons. The Islanders really don't have those options. The Islanders have Barzal, who maybe, I guess, is on the Capitals, maybe is the secondary option when it comes to scoring, but they just don't have the finisher there, and I think that's kind of what you've seen brought to light here in the postseason, where they're just lacking that. That being said, though, I will say you look at when the Islanders have scored on the power play, it's come up in big moments, which has been very beneficial for them. So maybe they're not capitalizing on every power play chance that they get, but the ones that they have were certainly important moments in the game.
You look at the Capitals, and you have Ovechkin lined up in that one-time slot on the left side, and the Islanders have Bailey. So not a knock on Bailey, but he's no Ovechkin, and he's not going to take a shot like that. But yeah,
I mean, they did hit 2 posts, but Villiers hit a couple of posts on the power play in that game too. So it's a little bit of bad puck luck, but they did lose focus last night after getting out to an early 2-0 lead. Do you think the Capitals just woke up, or was it more on the Islanders for getting a little sloppy?
I think it was a little bit of both because the Capitals certainly they were pissed. I think you sensed that frustration when Alexander Ovechkin just went after Casey Cizikas. In a normal game, Alexander Ovechkin is not going after Casey Cizikas. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I looking back on it, hindsight's always 2020. I know I tweeted last night that kind of a shot at that. I'm like, I hope that getting that frustration was worth it for Ovi because he got called for a 2-minute power play penalty. And it was, because after that, you really sensed that the Capitals kind of got a kick in the pants, and their urgency was there, and their battle level was there. And like all those coaching cliches that we hear and we kind of just roll our eyes on, they exemplified them after that, because the Islanders had dominated the first 10 minutes of that game. And I think there was a lot of people that were just ready to go, all right, this series is done. Islanders have booked their ticket. And the Capitals, to their credit, they just said, screw that. And they came back and they fought and they played the way they needed to. That also threw the Islanders off their game a bit, because you saw the Islanders get kind of tossed around a little bit. The Capitals were playing their game. They were playing their frustrating physical style of hockey. And they threw the Islanders off. And that's not to say the Islanders can't play physical hockey. But, they had their pests doing what their pests do best. And that was kind of giving the Islanders a hard time. It was forcing the Islanders to take silly penalties. Matt Barzal taking 2 penalties in the first 5 minutes of the second period was brutal. And that really led to the 2 goals that the Capitals scored to tie the game. And then it was just downhill from there, because once they had the momentum, the Capitals never took their foot off the gas. And they were pounding away at the Islanders and pounding away at the Islanders and pounding away at the Islanders. And they, for the first time, the Islanders looked tired and they looked worn down for the first time really in the postseason. Because if you look back at Game 3 against the Panthers, even then the Islanders were playing their game. They were the better team 5-on-5 that entire game. It was a lot of silly mistakes and special teams that cost them. This game, special teams cost them, silly mistakes cost them, and then the Capitals' game plan just cost them. The Capitals just wore them down, and that was a very interesting thing to see. And the momentum right now is in the Capitals' favor, because they're playing with house money. They have nothing to lose at this point. The pressure is on the Islanders. The pressure is on the Islanders not to choke at this point, because now the Capitals are feeling it. And that's a little concerning if you're an Islanders fan, because once the Capitals start to feel it, their game plan certainly gets going, and their game play certainly runs teams ragged. That's not to say the Islanders seemed concerned when we spoke to them over the Zoom calls the last couple days or so, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because the momentum shifted for sure.
Yeah, I was actually kind of shocked the Capitals didn't come out of the gate the way the Islanders did yesterday. You expected them to come out flying, and then, they go down 2 goals, a timeout's called, and then this game just completely changes. And yeah, the Islanders got bullied around. You saw their top defensive pair. They played sloppy, but it looked like they were tired. They're worn down. They're playing a lot of minutes. We'll get to it in a second. Cal Clutterbuck, he leaves the game, doesn't return. You tweeted out that it looks like he's ready to go. Regardless, though, do you see Ross Johnson sliding into this lineup somehow, maybe on the third line to take Komarov's spot, or you think he, rides the bench and they stick with the same group?
Right now, it's tough to say. Barry Trotz, the Islanders head coach, did say that that they were looking at making changes at the lineup. Obviously, I think Islander fans their first thought is, all right, let's get Ross Johnson there, because they want to match the physicality. And I think it's fair to point out, while Ross Johnson certainly does that, the Islanders' style is more suited towards putting in a guy like Tom Kuhnhackl and then possibly putting in Johnny Boychuk back in the lineup for Andy Green, because Boychuk certainly helps out on the special team side of things. So does Kuhnhackl. So those are options that are in play too. I certainly wouldn't discount that, and not to say that Ross Johnson there isn't a chance he gets in. We'll find out at some point tomorrow whether Barry Trotz mentions it. If the Islanders have availability before the game, or it turns out we see him on the ice for warm-ups and then in the subsequent lineup. But there's a chance that it's not Ross Johnson, and there's a chance it's Kuhnhackl, and there's a chance it's Boychuk. We just don't know at the moment. Anything's possible at this point, but I don't want people to get too disappointed because they want to see that kind of that tough guy out there in Ross Johnson, and then it ends up being Tom Kuhnhackl.
Well, yeah, if you put Ross Johnson in there, that's playing to the Capitals' way. The physicality, that's just trying to black out them. But that's not the Islanders' game plan. It's defensive. It's using the opportunities they do get. And Ross Johnson's a great skater for his size. He can definitely handle Wilson. But, do you want to put a guy like that in that moment? He might take an undisciplined penalty, and that might come back to bite the Islanders.
Yeah, no, I mean, my concern is even that as far as taking an undisciplined penalty, because I don't think that Ross Johnson really has that nature in him per se. But it's just putting in the right fit, and the Islanders have always gone with what fits them in the best situation. That's really the game plan for Barry Trotz when he was talking earlier today about what kind of changes. They're going to have some meetings, they're going to figure it out, they're going to look at the situations, and then they'll go from there. And that's really the way Trotz has coached, forever, and especially since he's got here with the Islanders.
So you mentioned how the Capitals gained a little bit of momentum and they're playing with house money. Do you think that although it's not necessarily a must-win, that Game 5 feels like the Islanders need to take it to stop and halt all the Capitals' momentum?
Oh, yeah. I think, I wrote a little bit today on NYI Hockey Now about that. The Islanders, they've been in this situation before. They did it with the Florida Panthers last round. They've done it before when it comes to getting things back on track with the Game 1, the way they played through the first, 38 minutes or so of that game. And the Islanders have to do that now. They cannot afford to give the Capitals the momentum, because once you give the Capitals the momentum back in the game, all bets are off. There's a reason why this team was a Stanley Cup champion 2 years ago. There's a reason why they're a perennial favorite every year in the division, in the conference, because they have such a talented roster there that you give them the chance to play their game and their style, and you give them a little bit of life, they're going to run. They're going to run and take that, and it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a tough battle for the Islanders. They have to find that resolve. They have to find that will to go out there and close the series out and not give the Capitals any sort of momentum that they would get from that. So I think you're not wrong in saying that it's kind of turned into a must-win, because you don't want to give the Capitals that life and say, hey, we're keeping you guys in there, or we're giving you the chance to stay in there. So you just don't want to play that game at this point.
Well, Christian, thank you very much for joining us. Guys, this is Christian Arnold of NYI Hockey Now. Go check out his stuff. Great writer, and he's covering the Islanders throughout the postseason, so definitely follow him on Twitter and keep up to date with his new project, NYI Hockey Now.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the time.
See you, bud. What a guy. He's my mentor. We worked at the Islanders Inside together. He's a great guy, and definitely check his stuff out. He is a top-notch professional. He has interviews with players. He's on the Zoom calls. He's in the media rooms when they were allowed to be there. So definitely a guy that must follow. C_Arnold01 on Twitter. Before we cut to commercial break in a couple of minutes, just to recap what he pretty much said is that, the Islanders don't want to make lineup changes. Clearly, it's worked. What they've done before last night's game, they were 4-0 with Komarov in the lineup on that third line. He's in there to kill penalties. And one thing we didn't talk to Arnold about was the fact that Komarov did not look good at all yesterday. He looked terrible to the point where I just couldn't believe that he was still out there. I thought maybe you'd get benched, but Clutterbuck got hurt. The whole team played bad. It's hard to pin it on Komarov, but there was few things in mind when I was watching that I saw. First off, when the Islanders win a faceoff in the defensive zone while they're killing a penalty and you have an opportunity to clear the puck and you're on the team to kill penalties, there's no excuse for that's BS, Brendan. That's BS if you can't clear the zone. And I agree. And then there was another play where the Islanders were breaking out. Don't know when in the game it was. Don't remember it all. But Komarov had an easy pass in the offensive zone to pass to someone to take a quick shot. But he passed it behind him, which means that the player now, I forgot who it was, has to corral the puck, then shoot. Timing's off completely. And I saw that, and I was like, you know what? That's a little thing that people probably aren't really looking at, but that's a game changer. You got rid of a high scoring chance, and now it's a minimal scoring chance, and the Islanders didn't convert on the play. They had to reset, regroup. And it's tough to see because it's not like he's a rookie under a lot of pressure in his first playoff game. This is a veteran. And to see that really pissed me off.
Yeah, I mean, he did look shaky. I think the Islanders as a whole started to look shaky as soon as the Capitals turned it on. And Alexander Ovechkin played a big part in that, and as Christian said. And Alexander Ovechkin has either been very prevalent or very irrelevant in this series. There's been no in between. He's scored 2 goals twice. He's a great hockey player. We've all seen what he can do, but he's also disappeared at times. And I think that for the Islanders' sake, now that he's going to be there and he's going to be a force to be reckoned with in an elimination game. And coming out in Game 5, you're going to have to shut him down. If he scores 1 goal, I remember talking from experience, obviously, as a Rangers fan. The Rangers played the Capitals all the time in the playoffs. Ovechkin in every single elimination game scored. It's just inevitable that he's going to put the puck in the net. He's that talented of a player. But if you hold him to 1, you're going to win the game. If the Islanders held them to 1 yesterday, I fully think that they win that hockey game. And if I'm an Islanders fan, I have the utmost confidence that they come out in Game 5 and do the job that they have to do.
You look at Ovechkin, and they woke a sleeping giant because they take, so many penalties. The problem is Ovechkin was really quiet. He scored, I think, his first goal of the series in tight, one that Varlamov definitely want back. But again, it's Ovechkin. That shot's coming in a lot harder than we see on TV. It beats him 7-hole, I believe. But you're taking all these penalties, and that's just warm-ups for Ovechkin from that slot. Yes, Varlamov did a great job besides the one that went in on reading that play. That was the one they scored was through a screen. But you woke up a sleeping giant, and now the Islanders have to put him back to bed. They got to tuck him away, kiss him goodnight, and just not let him do anything because – like we said, Devon Taves on that 2-on-1. You got to play the shot there because Alexander Ovechkin, and he's going to shoot that puck. Does Varlamov want that one back? He might want it because it's an unreal shot. It didn't beat him high. It beat him in tight, 7-hole right side on blocker. But as a goalie, you're trained, you're taking the shot usually, which means that you're giving yourself the best chance being as aggressive as possible to take the shot. We're going to call it a perfect shot because it went where Varlamov's pads weren't. Obviously, going top shelf there probably would have done the job as well, but Ovechkin didn't want to show off that much and decided to go 7-hole. Respect to him a little bit. But like you said, you wake up Ovechkin, he's going to be here or he's not. And if the Islanders can do a better job at shutting him down, again, that comes with not taking penalties. You take penalties, you know he's going to have a high chance to come through. He's done it throughout his whole entire career. He goes from that spot. Doesn't matter what you do, he'll find a way to score. And if he doesn't, like Arnold said, which compares differently to the Islanders' power play, they have so many other weapons. Kuznetsov, you have Carlson, Oshie. Who do the Islanders have if Bavillia is not scoring on the power play? Derek Brassard? Again, no offense to Derek. It's just to a point where the Islanders rather play 5-on-5 hockey. They've been amazing at 5-on-5 hockey. That's their bread and butter is not taking penalties. And we saw the success in the first couple of games of the series. The Islanders were taking, I think, 2 or less penalties a game. And they were winning. Why? Because they're good at 5-on-5. It doesn't give Ovechkin the opportunity to take a shot from there or anybody else, for that matter, on the Capitals team. So I think it's just tough as an Islander fan to see what happened yesterday. But again, like you said, tomorrow is a must-win. If the Islanders drop the game tomorrow, the Caps have complete momentum and they win the series. I'm going to say right now, if the Islanders not get the job done, I'm saying it, get off my back. But I fully expect the Islanders to win it tomorrow. I did expect them to win it in 4. Stuff happens. It's hockey. It's hard to. The hardest game to win is that last game for the sweep. That's tough, and you just hope the Islanders, get back to the game again. If they played the way they played in the first 10 minutes, and they got the lead, and they weren't not cocky, but took their pedals off the brake, let the Capitals play their game. That's when they get in trouble. Again, we saw that in January. This Capitals team is a veteran team, and they know how to not give up and come back in key moments. They are Backstrom-less. Will Backstrom play tomorrow? Not sure. He didn't warm up in the last game, so I'm hesitant to say he probably won't be in there. But this team is definitely playing for him. They're playing as a unit, and when they play that physical the way they played last night, things bode well for them, and it's a problem for the Islanders.
Yep, I completely agree. I think that the Islanders do win tomorrow. We've seen a lot of phenomenal shots this postseason by Michael Raffl, Hayden Fleury today, Jacob Chychrun on the Arizona Coyotes, and, of course, Ovechkin shot yesterday. But, guys, stay with us. After this commercial break, we will announce the lucky winner of a Islanders rally towel and a Mike Sillinger bobblehead. So you don't want to miss that. And we're going to get into baseball after this commercial break, so please stay tuned.
You're listening to the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You're listening to the BS Sports Show on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the BS Sports Show. So it is time to announce the winner of the Mike Sillinger bobblehead and the Islanders rally towel. It was picked randomly on Twitter, and the